so many women can relate to not having children or friends that didn't have children, Democratic women who feel like it's an insult of epic proportions among Democrats, and they have seized on it. They have jumped on it. You're seeing cat ladies for Harris mobilizing, and it's such a visual, and that's why J D Vance used it, right? It's a visual, it's an insult. However, it is a term that Democratic women, young women, don't like, and they will jump on that.
Can I start with the opinion polls? Because since the
Yeah, yes.
since the the big events of the last, what is it, just week or so, I was in Milwaukee for that for the Republican
Oh,
National Convention, and then after that we saw well, the whole thing being put into a different place
yeah.
by Joe Biden giving way to Kamala Harris, and since then, and day by day now, I'm seeing evidence of opinion polls not moving dramatically, but moving significantly, and in a way that, well, in most of the polls' case, will not be pleasing to the eyes and the ears of Donald Trump. Can you just get us up to date with what's happening?
The polls are definitely getting tighter. People are realizing that a presidential race is happening. And the Wall Street Journal poll that came out just this weekend showed that it was effectively high, which is something we hadn't seen. We've seen a lot of Democrats just not be enthusiastic. Fox News, which Donald Trump watches quite frequently, they also had a poll of battleground states that will matter in the US election, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, et cetera. And Kamala Harris was leading in those. So it is really, in the past week or so, an election that most people were dreading has suddenly gotten exciting. It's gotten something that people are watching the day by day and looking at what all of these candidates are saying and really getting ready to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, the opinion polls, broadly and individually are just so interesting. I mean, you're not seeing, well, in one or two cases, you are seeing quite dramatic movement, but when it comes to sort of key sections of the American voting public, for example, among African American voters and among Latino American voters, there have been really quite striking movements.
Yeah, we've seen, I think in 2016, 2020, you saw Biden especially built a coalition in 2020 of Black voters. He was able to build what they call the blue wall of white working class voters in places like Michigan and Wisconsin. And then in recent months, we've seen Donald Trump really get support from Black men, especially, who have said in interviews and polls that they like what Trump's talking about. We've also seen voters increasingly worried about crime, and Black voters, white voters, suburban voters, they are worried about crime in their communities that has increased since 2020, and a lot of them blame Biden for that. So we've seen Trump get support. I think there's a glow to someone who's not in the incumbency. You kind of forget maybe the problems you had with them, and
Yeah.
you think, oh, this person's pitching new ideas and it wasn't so bad then, and maybe you're willing to swing one way or the other.
And when it came to Kamala Harris, I mean, her attempts in 2020 to get the Democrat nomination simply blew up. It fell apart in the course of that fight. She pulled out while it was still in
Didn't even
in
make
full
it to
swing.
Iowa.
Didn't
Yeah.
even make it to the key Iowa caucuses. And now look, I mean, such a fascinating change, and I guess Camp Trump can be forgiven for being rather nervous about what's going on. I guess you're picking up that precise signal, aren't you, Natalie?
There's an excitement among Democrats, and maybe it was because there was a level of depression that potentially could have been medically diagnosed a few weeks ago among Democrats. And so now there's this excitement. I was talking to a Democratic operative who was texting me coconut emojis because that's taken off. There's memes there. They're just so excited to have hope that they can beat Trump. It's very palpable in a way that I think they maybe didn't want to talk about with Biden. Biden has had, by most measures that Democrats would use, a very successful 3.5 years in office. So it's very hard for them to criticize him, but they were so worried, and now they feel like they have a chance.
It does seem, Natalie, doesn't it? This election, more than any other we've seen, the medium for this election is social media, is memes and clips. I mean, I know there's a clearer. I know
Probably won't see me dancing, but there's lots of dances going around.
There's a lot of dancing and other pretty creative bits and pieces out on social media. And when it comes to clips, Natalie, that clip of J D Vance with his comment, which goes back to, what is it, 2021, of referring to Kamala Harris and other women in the Democratic camp as being, what was it, childless cat
Childless
ladies?
cat ladies.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
that has been viral literally for days, and it set the pace of the discussion.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think so many women can relate to not having children or friends that didn't have children, Democratic women who feel like it's an insult of epic proportions among Democrats, and they have seized on it. They have jumped on it. You're seeing cat ladies for Harris mobilizing, and it's such a visual, and that's why J D Vance used it, right? It's a visual, it's an insult. However, it is a term that Democratic women, young women, don't like, and they will jump on that. They don't want to be seen as derisive. I have heard from people who say, "What's wrong with being a childless cat lady? We don't want to be, put upon and be discriminated against for our cat lady tendencies." And now there's memes with the childless dog ladies jumping to support the childless cat ladies. So the election is alive and well on the internet.
It's seen as being an equivalent to that moment where Hillary Clinton, do you remember she spoke about some of the Trump supporters as being
deplorables.
the deplorables?
Deplorables, yeah. It's very akin to that moment where you have something, you don't necessarily think you have something for a very specific audience, but it gets taken into an it gets put in the blender of the internet and it comes out in a meme form that takes off.
And let's not forget the greatest childless cat lady of them all, who is, of course, Taylor Swift, who has a fan base that can change the GDP of nations when she comes and tours. So I think that
She has not weighed in, but I think everyone is waiting. She endorsed Biden in 2020, and I don't know if the childless cat lady comment will encourage her to get more active in politics, but she has been very good at mobilizing U.S. voters to register to vote.
Yes.
When she tweets out a link to encourage people to register to vote, it has been tracked that it skyrockets voting registration. So it will be interesting to see if the queen of all childless cat ladies, Taylor Swift,
There was a bit of fake news. You'll have seen it online a couple of days ago. So someone put out a false report that Taylor Swift was going to hook up with Beyonce and do a sort of giant mega concert as a fundraiser for Kamala Harris. And there was no such plan. I mean, as far as we're aware, there was no such plan, but it caught on like wildfire around the world. And it gave you a sense of the potential there for those two performers, those two artists, and the power they could have in this American election, Natalie.
Definitely. We haven't seen like celebrities really be involved much in the election until the past 2 weeks. Now Kamala Harris is going to go out with Megan Thee Stallion in Atlanta, she's a hip hop star, and you're seeing people join in Zoom calls. Celebrities, Pink jumped in from a concert for a big Zoom call with Harris. So you'll definitely probably see a lot more star-studded parties and events at the DNC in Chicago, and I'm sure Democrats are scrambling to get some of those folks on stage, get some eyeballs onto the TV screen, and what is not always a very exciting convention process to watch. And I mean, you have Steven Spielberg who is helping produce it and things like that. So we'll probably see some star power, but I don't know if we'll see Taylor Swift and Beyonce.
No,
I think Hillary Clinton got Katy Perry.
No, well, that would be. Imagine her turning up on stage in Chicago at the Democratic convention at the back end of August. And we've still got that to come, and that will always give the party having the convention a lift in the polls. So they're seeing this movement now. Then you get the convention, and then you get the run into the big day in November. Hoping to be there, by the way, in November in the US for that election. Cannot wait to get out there. Stay with us, Natalie, if you can. So great to get your input into the conversation. Natalie Andrews there from the Wall Street Journal, here with us with Tim Montgomery and Rachel Conliffe in the studio on PNR and Friends. It is now 6:49. This is Times Radio. Here with me on PNR and Friends, Natalie Andrews from the Wall Street Journal, who has joined us from across the Atlantic Ocean, and Tim Montgomery and Rachel Conliffe are here too. Natalie, can I just get your thought on what looks to be now a current of speculation? Maybe it's more than a speculation, but you watch Donald Trump and the ex-president now, who was so very keen on presidential debates, and for obvious reasons, because he absolutely marmalized Joe Biden in that last presidential debate. He now seems as if he's backing away towards the exit from that commitment. Is that a fair reading?
Yes, they've put out statements saying they want to see Democrats actually nominate someone, kind of a dig at them changing the nominee after the debate. But it does seem as though they are waiting. Maybe they want to renegotiate the terms. Maybe Trump has issued some comments saying, our debate's necessary. So it does seem as though the debate, which was scheduled for September, is a little up in question as to whether or not the two will face off. And
Right.
there's usually a vice presidential debate. We don't have a candidate for the Democrats before, but that is also unknown.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no debate, that's a big story. If there is a debate, that's another huge story. What are you thinking about this? We do love our election debates, Rachel and Tim, don't we?
I mean, I had enough of election debates of the UK kind during that 6-week process. I just don't think we're as good at them as the US ones. I watched all the Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton ones in 2016, and they really were a bizarre viewing experience. There was one where he sort of followed her around.
He patrolled the stage.
He did.
Yeah.
But also we saw that she was seen to have comprehensively won those debates, and it didn't really make a difference to the end outcome. It does feel, though, that the Republican strategy was very focused on Joe Biden and attacking Joe Biden, and all the momentum that they built up in the Republican convention in Milwaukee, huge momentum, just seems to have stalled after Joe Biden made that decision and Kamala Harris became the de facto nominee. And one of the things that has just surprised me slightly, and I'd be interested to get anyone's thoughts on this, is did they not have a backup plan? Did they not think that the chances of the Democratic Party realising the state that Joe Biden was in and deciding to switch candidates, that was a very real possibility?
What about that, Natalie? I mean, you'd think it would have been, I don't know, plan C or D, if not plan B. It was not wholly impossible to imagine that might have been the outcome.
Yeah, the Republicans see Kamala Harris as having negatives, and I think they'll gear up for that. But they were caught. I don't know if anyone expected Joe Biden to do as bad as he did during the debate.
Yeah.
Democrats were caught off guard. We've reported extensively how Biden's public appearances were so limited that a lot of people didn't know how he was doing and that he had the potential to have such a performance. So I think for some Republicans, it has taken them a minute to get on their footing. Donald Trump hasn't really come up with a nickname for Kamala Harris. He hasn't found his stride with attacking her in the same way that he definitely did with Joe Biden. And so we'll have to see. I imagine that they will feel like the convention gives them plenty of points. They'll talk a lot about crime and immigration. Kamala Harris had, been put in charge or had been tasked with looking at some immigration issues. She worked with some Latin American countries to work with them, but Republicans have attacked her for not going to the border enough, and they wanted to see her at the border. So it will be interesting to see if they can develop some more attacks that are personal to her and that stick.
I think the Republicans definitely were counting on Joe Biden sort of carrying on, and I think their plan B was they didn't think Kamala Harris was very good. But
I think that's very true, right?
But I think
they feel like Kamala Harris had negatives that she'd shown on her own, and I think Democrats being so worried about anyone but Joe Biden, suddenly Kamala Harris looked fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing that I don't think has happened, though, is Joe Biden hasn't gone away. He is still president of the United States, and he will be there for 6 months. And my question is still really, in 3 months of the election, is I think his deterioration is actually, it was that great surprise in the debate, how much worse he was than anyone really expected, Republicans or Democrats. I think his deterioration is going to continue. He's still going to be commander-in-chief. We've been talking this evening about the airstrike in Beirut. He will not be able to avoid being in front of the cameras. And that management of the relationship between Kamala Harris, the candidate, and still this incumbent president, he has an ego. This whole thing that he gently stood aside for the good of the country. He was forced out, basically, by every senior Democrat lawmaker saying, you have to go. I think he will not be able to resist the opportunity to want to be on the stage in the next 3 months. And whether those interventions will help the Democrats, I think, is still a live issue. So we haven't seen the end, I don't think, of Joe Biden's impact on this race.
Natalie.
I think that's very true. It will be interesting to see how he takes the stage in the convention. I think Democrats were very worried after the debate that Joe Biden, who is set to be their nominee, was going to take the best prime time spot in the convention on Thursday night and not be able to give a dynamic speech. That worry has assuaged, but now you've got the president of the United States maybe getting a not great spot on Monday or Tuesday. And what does he do? What does his staff do? People that thought that they were going to be managing into a next re-election. There's a lot of people around these top candidates, and it will be interesting to see how they manage that, how the leadership transition goes well. I think it wasn't even clear until it happened that Joe Biden was going to immediately endorse Harris. And so there will be some bumps.